The chamber was vast and cold, its walls made of polished black stone that reflected the flickering lights above. A silence filled the room, one heavy with the weight of history. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in rows, their eyes trained on the large, circular table in the center. At the far end of the room, the human delegation sat stiffly, their uniforms neat and their faces masked with the professionalism of diplomats. But beneath the surface, every member of the Earth delegation could feel the rising tide of uncertainty. Commander Rachel Bennett sat at the head of the table, her posture straight, but her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She had been part of Earth's military, its finest officer. She had led human forces through battles with alien species, helped form alliances, and defended Earth from threats far greater than anyone could imagine. But today, the fate of humanity was not in her hands. Today, the fate of Earth would be decided by the Galactic Council. The decision that loomed before them was simple, or so it seemed. The Kratha Empire, a ruthless alien species that spanned several sectors of the galaxy, had made it clear that Earth's rapid technological advancements were seen as a threat. The Krathi demanded that humanity submit to their rule or face extinction. The Council, a body made up of powerful and ancient species, had been tasked with deciding humanity's future. Some believed that Earth was a potential ally, a species worthy of respect and inclusion, but others feared the unpredictability of humans. They saw them as wild, too aggressive, too quick to rise, too dangerous to trust. The Kratha had pressed hard, and now, with the eyes of the galaxy upon them, the Council had to decide. Should humanity be allowed to remain in galactic affairs, or should they be cast aside? Rachel had tried everything: diplomacy, reason, and even the military presence of Earth's best ships. But the Council was divided, each species weighing its own interests above the good of humanity. Some species had voted in favor of Earth, but others, more powerful, more ancient, had sided with the Kratha. Now the Council was about to vote. Rachel knew that if the vote went against Earth, humanity would be expelled from galactic affairs. It would be a death sentence to Earth's future in the galaxy. They would be isolated, left to fend for themselves in a hostile universe. Commander Bennett, the Council leader, a tall, spindly figure from the Rithka species, said. His voice was calm, almost detached. "It is time for your final statement. Please proceed." Rachel's throat tightened. She stood up slowly, looking around at the faces of the Council. The Rithka, with their translucent skin and sharp, insect-like features. The CHR, massive, armored beings with eyes that seemed to pierce into the soul. The Vantari, beings of pure energy, flickering and shifting as they hovered. Each of them represented a race far older than humanity, their eyes filled with judgment. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Thank you, Council. We've stood on the brink of disaster before. Earth was once a small planet isolated from the rest of the galaxy. But we've proven time and time again that humanity has the will to survive, to adapt, and to rise when faced with challenges. Our species is not perfect. We've made mistakes. But we've also learned from them. We've fought for peace, we've fought for survival, and we've fought for the future of our children." She paused, locking eyes with the Council members. "We ask for your trust, not because we are the most powerful, but because we believe in something greater than ourselves. We believe in the future of Earth, of the galaxy, and of every species in it. We are not a threat. We are a promise. We will fight for the future of this galaxy as we have fought for the survival of our own world." The room was silent. For a brief moment, Rachel allowed herself to feel hopeful. But as the seconds passed, she saw the faces around her begin to change, some looking down, some glancing at each other. Rachel could see the verdict forming in their eyes. "The vote will proceed," the Rithka leader said, breaking the silence. His tone was impassive, like a judge about to deliver a death sentence. The lights in the chamber dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the vote. A large screen appeared in the center of the room, and the voting symbols began to glow, one by one, as each Council member cast their decision. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as she watched, hopping, praying that her words had made a difference. First, the Vantari voted in favor of humanity, their glowing forms flickering with approval. Rachel allowed herself a small breath of relief. Next, the CHR, the powerful warrior race, cast their vote. The screen blinked with a solid red X against humanity. The Krathi had lobbied hard for this. The votes kept coming in, some in favor but most against. Each vote felt like a knife, each decision a crushing weight on her chest. She glanced at her crew, Lieutenant Nathan Klein, her right hand, his face unreadable, Mia Thompson, her tech expert, biting her lip in nervous tension. When the final vote was cast, the screen went dark for a long moment. Finally, the result flashed on the screen in bold red letters. Humanity is hereby expelled from Galactic Council affairs. Rachel felt as if the floor had dropped out beneath her. The decision was made. Earth was alone. The room buzzed with whispers as the council's members began to stand and leave, exchanging words in their strange languages. Rachel stood still, her fists clenched at her sides as the weight of the decision settled over her. The council had spoken. Humanity had been cast aside. But Rachel wasn't done. She turned to her team, her voice steady as steel. "We're leaving, and we will make them regret this. Earth will rise on its own, and we'll show them just how dangerous we can be." Without a word, the human delegation stood, turned, and exited the room, leaving the council behind. They didn't need to say anything. The decision was made, and now the galaxy would feel the consequences. The silence that followed their departure from the Galactic Council's chamber was deafening. Rachel Bennett's heart was still pounding as she walked through the corridors, her crew following silently behind her. They had just been expelled from the very body that governed the galaxy, the place where decisions were made that affected the fate of entire species. It was the ultimate betrayal. "We've been thrown out," Lieutenant Nathan Klein said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief. "What now, Commander? What do we do?" Rachel didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. They all knew the gravity of what had just happened. Humanity had been cast aside, deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable. They were now isolated, unwanted in a galaxy that had once seemed full of possibilities. The Krathi, the galactic empire that had threatened them, had won. The Council had sided with them, and humanity was left with nothing but the cold void of space. But Rachel wasn't one to sit idly by. She had spent her entire life fighting for Earth's place in the stars, and she wasn't going to let it end like this. Not now. Not after everything they had worked for. "We don't give up," Rachel said, her voice steady but firm. "The galaxy thinks we're weak. They think we'll just disappear, but we're going to show them just how wrong they are." Later that night, as the crew gathered around a table in the Independence's briefing room, Rachel laid out her plan. It was a long shot, but it was their only option. They had no allies now. Earth's fleet was small compared to the powers they'd just faced, and their resources were limited. But they still had something, their will to survive. "We'll hit the Krathi where it hurts," Rachel said, her eyes scanning the faces of her crew. "We may not have the numbers, but we have something they don't, the ability to adapt. The Council gave them what they wanted, but we can still fight. And we're going to." "What do you mean, hit the Krathi?" Mia Thompson, the tech specialist, asked, her voice cautious. "They're an entire empire, Commander. They have fleets. We have a few ships." Rachel nodded. "We can't take them head-on, but we don't need to. We're going to strike where they least expect it. They've become too comfortable. They think they've won. We'll remind them that Earth doesn't give up so easily." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "And how do we do that?" Rachel's face hardened. "We take out their supply lines, their communication hubs. We target the systems they rely on to keep their empire running smoothly. A few well-placed strikes, and we'll make them feel our presence." Mia still looked unsure, but she didn't argue. "If we can pull it off, it could send a message," she said slowly. "We wouldn't need to destroy everything, just hit their confidence." "Exactly," Rachel said. We're not trying to wipe them out. We're trying to make them realize that we're not going away. The Council might have cast us aside, but Earth is a force to be reckoned with. The next few days were a blur of preparation. The crew worked around the clock, using their limited resources to plan the attack. They would need to hit fast, hit hard, and then disappear before the Krathi could retaliate. Every move had to be precise, and every person had to do their part. As the Independence left the confines of the station, Rachel stood at the helm, staring out at the stars. It was the first time in days that she felt a sense of purpose. The fight wasn't over. They still had a chance to prove themselves. "We'll hit their communications hub first," Rachel said to Nathan, who was at her side. "Once we disable their ability to communicate, we can strike at their supply ships, take away their resources. Without those, their fleets are nothing." Nathan nodded, his eyes scanning the star charts. "It's risky, but it might just work, if we don't make any mistakes." Rachel turned to him, her eyes burning with determination. "Mistakes aren't an option. We have one shot at this. If we fail, Earth could be finished, but if we succeed, we send a message." As they approached the Krathi border, Rachel's heart raced. She knew that this was their moment. Everything they had worked for, everything they had fought for, was on the line. They were about to face an empire that had crushed countless species. And yet, there was something inside Rachel that refused to back down. "We've reached their communication hub." Mia's voice came over the comms, breaking Rachel's thoughts. "It's a lot bigger than we thought, Commander. They're guarding it heavily." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "We expected that. Stay focused. We get in, disable their systems, and get out. No heroics, no mistakes." The tension in the air was palpable as the Independence moved closer to the hub. It was an enormous station, floating in space like a silent sentinel, guarded by Krathi ships. The odds were stacked against them, but Rachel knew they had the element of surprise on their side. The Krathi had underestimated humanity, and now they were about to pay the price. "On my mark," Rachel said, her voice low and commanding. 3, 2, 1, now." The Independence darted forward, weaving through the Krathi defenses, its weapons primed. A series of quick, well-placed strikes disabled the hub's communication systems. The massive station shuddered as its defenses faltered, and the Krathi fleet went into disarray. "Target the supply ships," Rachel ordered. "We're not stopping until we make them feel this." The crew moved with precision, carrying out the plan with flawless efficiency. The Krathi ships were caught off guard, unable to respond to the sudden assault. The Independence and its fleet of human ships disabled their supply lines, crippling the Krathi's ability to communicate and sustain their empire. As the final strike was made, Rachel felt a sense of victory she hadn't expected. They had done it. They had sent the message. "We've shown them, Commander," Nathan said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "We're not done yet." Rachel looked out at the stars, her heart filled with pride. "No, we're not done yet. We've just begun." The Independence and its small fleet of human ships had struck the Krathi communication hub like a storm. For a brief moment, it had seemed like a victory, an underdog strike that showed the galaxy that humanity wasn't finished. But that feeling didn't last. As soon as the Krathi recovered, they came after Earth with an overwhelming force. Rachel Bennett stood at the helm of the Independence, staring out into the dark void of space. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the armrests, the tension in her body like a wire stretched to its breaking point. They had done it. They had hit the Krathi's communication hub, and they had sent a message. But now, the galaxy's most feared empire was hunting them down. "They're coming, Commander," Nathan Klein's voice broke through her thoughts. His eyes were fixed on the tactical display, the flashing red icons of Krathi warships growing closer. "They're pissed." Rachel didn't need him to tell her that. She could see it in the data on the screen. The Krathi ships were huge, built for destruction, and now they were bearing down on them with everything they had. The Independence was fast, but it was small, and the fleet of Krathi ships was nothing short of massive. "We've only got a few hours before they reach us," Mia Thompson said, her voice tight with tension. "We've damaged their supply lines, but they'll regroup quickly. They're not just going to let us get away with this." Rachel looked over her shoulder at the rest of her crew, her family in this battle. She knew they were scared just like she was. The Krathi didn't lose. They wiped out civilizations. They ruled by fear. But humanity had been underestimated before. Now it was their turn to show the galaxy just how wrong that assumption was. "We won't run," Rachel said, her voice strong. "We've got one chance to make them pay for what they've done. We're not backing down, we fight." Nathan glanced at her, his face filled with admiration but also fear. "We're outnumbered, Commander, and this is just the beginning. If we stay, we die. If we run, we can't hide forever." Rachel locked eyes with him. "We're not running, not from them, not from anyone." The next few hours were a blur of chaos. The Independence and its small fleet engaged the Krathi head-on, knowing full well they didn't have the firepower to win in a straight-up fight. But Rachel wasn't interested in a fair fight. Humans didn't fight fair, they fought to survive. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Rachel barked, as Krathi ships fired at them. The Independence danced around the blasts, the ship's engines roaring as it zipped through space, dodging incoming fire and taking quick shots at the Krathi ships. The Independence wasn't the most powerful ship in the galaxy, but it was fast and nimble, a perfect fit for their strategy. They would keep the Krathi chasing them, picking them off one by one, trying to make them feel the sting of humanity's defiance. But the Krathi weren't the kind of enemy that would be easily shaken. They fought with relentless force, not caring about their own losses as long as they crushed their opponents. And Rachel could see the truth of that now. One of the human ships, the Phoenix, was hit by a massive blast, sending debris and flames into the void. The ship was gone. The crew, gone. Rachel's stomach twisted. She could feel every loss like it was her own, but she didn't have time to grieve. Not yet. "Report," she shouted, turning to Nathan. "Their firepower is too strong, Commander," Nathan said, his voice grim. "We're losing ships, we're losing people." Rachel clenched her fists, her teeth grinding in frustration. They couldn't win this battle outright, but they could keep fighting, they could keep pushing. "We fight to survive, we fight for Earth," she said, her voice fierce. "All ships get ready to jump. We'll use their momentum against them." "Jumping?" Mia's voice echoed through the comms. "Are you serious? We'll be running straight into Krathi space." "We don't have a choice," Rachel snapped. "We need to draw them in. Once we're in the heart of their territory, we'll hit their supply lines again. We can cripple their forces from the inside. This is the only chance we have." The crew fell silent, their eyes filled with doubt. But Rachel knew they were with her. They had to be. She turned back to the tactical display, her mind already racing ahead to the next step. They would survive this. They had to. "Prepare for jump in 3, 2, 1. Rachel's voice echoed through the comms. The ship's engines roared as the Independence and the remaining human ships entered warp speed, jumping into the heart of Krathi-controlled space. The transition was jarring, the universe around them warping and shifting as they accelerated to light speed. Rachel's grip tightened on the controls, her pulse racing. They were now deep in enemy territory. "Evasive maneuvers," Rachel yelled, her eyes locked on the readouts. The Krathi fleet, still hot on their tail, followed them into the jump, their larger ships closing in on them quickly. But Rachel's plan was already in motion. The moment the human ships exited the jump, they launched another round of attacks, disrupting Krathi supply stations and fueling stations scattered throughout the sector. The Krathi ships scattered to defend themselves, caught off guard by the audacity of humanity's strike. Rachel felt a spark of triumph. They were fighting back. They were surviving, and the Krathi, ruthless as they were, had made a grave mistake underestimating humans. "We can win this," Rachel said, looking at her crew. We've just shown the galaxy that humanity is not to be ignored. The Kratha had been warned, but they had underestimated humanity's resilience. And now they would learn. When Earth fights, Earth wins. The Independence and its remaining fleet had plunged into the heart of Kratha space, the galaxy's most feared empire. Humanity had made its move, and the Kratha were responding with overwhelming force. Yet, despite the odds stacked against them, Rachel Bennett knew they had made an impression. They had struck at the heart of the Kratha war machine, and now they were deep within enemy territory, pushing forward with a new sense of purpose. Rachel stood at the helm, watching the Kratha ship surge after them like wolves chasing prey. Her knuckles were white against the controls, but her eyes were sharp, her mind calculating the next move. The crew was exhausted, battered, but they were still alive, still fighting. "Commander," Nathan Klein's voice came through the comms, tense with urgency. "We've taken out another supply depot, but their reinforcements are coming in fast. We can't keep this up much longer." Rachel's jaw tightened. "We don't need to keep this up much longer, Nathan. Just enough to make them see we're not going down without a fight." She knew the stakes. Every second they stayed within Kratha-controlled space, they were at risk of being overwhelmed. But every second they fought, every strike they landed, sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. "Take us closer to the next target," Rachel ordered. "We hit them where it hurts." The fleet moved quickly through the asteroid belt that circled one of Kratha's largest military bases. Rachel had studied the charts and knew the terrain. The Kratha might have the firepower, but the human ships had speed and agility. The smaller ships, still intact, darted in and out of the cover the asteroids provided, taking out the Kratha's fuel supplies and attacking their communication relays. But as the battle raged on, Rachel felt the weight of the decisions pressing down on her. They were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for Earth's place in the galaxy. And with every attack, the Kratha grew angrier. They were relentless, their ships firing on anything that moved. The Independence took hits, but it kept moving, the crew following Rachel's every order without hesitation. "Enemy ships incoming," Mia Thompson's voice echoed from the communications console. "We've got 3 Kratha battle cruisers headed straight for us." Rachel looked at the display. The Kratha had brought their heaviest artillery. It was a gamble, but it was one they couldn't avoid. "Brace for impact. All ships form up on the Independence. We're going to hit them head-on." The crew responded quickly, their fear evident but overshadowed by their determination. Humanity was fighting against impossible odds. The Kratha might have their battleships and their vast empire, but humanity had something they didn't: an unshakable will to survive. As the 3 Kratha battle cruisers closed in, Rachel's mind raced. She couldn't just run, they needed to make this count. The Kratha had underestimated them once before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. "Prepare the main cannon," Rachel said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "On my mark, we fire everything we've got, full power." The Independence shook as the Kratha fired upon them, their weapons piercing the shields. The damage indicator flashed red on the screen, but Rachel didn't flinch. "Hold tight, this is it." She pushed the lever forward. Now, the Independence's main cannon fired, its blast tearing through the dark void. The Kratha cruisers were too close, and they didn't expect the humans to strike so decisively. The shot landed directly on the lead cruiser's port side, sending it into a violent spin. The other 2 cruisers began to pull back, trying to regroup, but the damage had been done. The human fleet had punched through the Kratha's front lines, and the message had been sent. "We've taken out one of their cruisers," Nathan said, disbelief in his voice. "They're retreating, they're pulling back." Rachel stood tall, feeling the adrenaline pumping through her veins. "We've just given them a taste of what's to come." But the battle wasn't over. Even as the Kratha fleet scattered, Rachel knew they would return with greater force. The Kratha didn't back down easily. They would come for Earth again, and this time they would bring everything they had. The crew of the Independence took a moment to breathe. The battle had been hard-fought, but the victory was sweet. For now, they had sent the Krathi a message. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. Rachel stood at the front of the bridge, her heart still pounding in her chest. The Independence was battered but still intact, and so was her crew. They had faced the impossible and come out on top. But as she looked out at the stars, a heavy feeling settled in her chest. This was just the beginning. The Krathi would come back, and the galaxy, despite everything they had shown it, still saw humanity as an outsider, a threat, an unknown quantity. "What's next?" Mia asked, her voice quiet. Rachel didn't hesitate. "We regroup, we build our forces, and when the Krathi come back, we'll be ready." The galaxy had given them its back, but humanity had learned to fight alone. And when the next battle came, the Krathi would remember this moment. Humanity had shown them just how dangerous it could be when they were pushed to the edge. The stars stretched endlessly outside the window, a cold and unforgiving sea of light. Rachel Bennett sat in the command chair of the Independence, staring into the void. Her hands were tight on the armrests, knuckles white from the tension. The battle with the Krathi had been a victory, yes, but the cost had been high, too high. "We lost the Phoenix," Mia Thompson's voice came through the comms. It was soft, almost a whisper. "We lost a lot of good people." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She couldn't. The faces of the crew members she had lost flashed in her mind, names she'd known, faces she had seen every day. And now they were gone. It was a bitter reminder of the price humanity had paid to send a message. "We can't keep doing this," Mia continued, her voice cracking. "We can't keep fighting like this. The Krathi will come for us again, and they won't stop until we're all dead." Rachel turned her chair slowly, facing the screen in front of her. She could see the faces of her remaining crew members, all of them weary but resolute. They had just faced one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, and they were still standing. But at what cost? Rachel's jaw tightened. "We have to keep fighting, they won't stop coming for us, and we're not going to let them win." The words felt hollow even as she said them. She had to say them. She had to believe them. Because if she didn't keep this crew alive, then all the sacrifices would have been for nothing. She stood up, walking to the front of the bridge. "Mia," she called, her voice firm, "I need a full damage report." Mia's face appeared on the screen. Her eyes were tired, but her expression was steady. "The Independence is holding together, barely. The hull has significant damage, and we're running low on supplies. We've lost about a third of our fighters. The Krathi damaged our shields more than I thought." Rachel nodded, processing the information. They were hurting, but they were alive. They had to stay that way. They had to. "We'll make it work," Rachel said, her voice unwavering. "Get the repair teams ready. We need to get back to Earth space as quickly as possible. The longer we stay here, the more the Krathi will hunt us down." Days passed as the crew worked tirelessly to repair their ships and regroup. They couldn't afford to sit still. Earth was still their home, but after the Krathi attack, it felt farther away than ever. Rachel sat in her quarters late one night, staring at the stars outside her window. The silence was deafening, a reminder of how alone they were. A soft knock on the door broke her thoughts. She didn't need to look to know who it was. "Come in," she said, her voice softer than she intended. Nathan Klein entered, standing in the doorway for a moment before walking over to her. He sat down beside her, his face tired but calm. "You're pushing us too hard, Rachel," Nathan said quietly. "We can't keep up like this. People are starting to crack. I've never seen them so tired, so afraid." Rachel didn't look at him. She couldn't. She knew it was true, but she had no other choice. "We can't stop," Rachel replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Krathi won't stop until they wipe us out. Earth's future depends on us showing them we're not going down without a fight." "I get that, I do," Nathan said, his voice tinged with frustration. "But you can't carry this all on your own. We need you to to be human, not just a leader. Rachel felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She turned to look at Nathan, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions: regret, anger, fear, and determination. "I'm not just a leader, Nathan," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm the only one left who can keep us going. The moment I let go, everything falls apart. You know that." Nathan met her gaze, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was nothing more to say. He understood what she was trying to do, even if it meant sacrificing herself in the process. "I know," he said finally, "but we need you whole. You can't keep breaking yourself like this." Rachel closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She knew he was right. She couldn't keep pushing herself to the breaking point. The crew needed her, but she needed them too. They were all that was left of Earth's fight. "I'll try," she whispered, "but I can't promise anything." The next day, Rachel gathered her crew for a briefing. The repair teams had worked through the night, and they were ready to make the jump back to Earth's space. But even as they prepared, Rachel knew the Krathi wouldn't let them go without a fight. The galaxy was changing, and Earth was about to face its biggest test. "We're almost home," Rachel said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "The Krathi know we're a threat, but they'll never understand the one thing we have that they don't: the will to fight. We're not done yet." The crew stood silent, but Rachel could see the fire returning to their eyes. They were ready to continue the fight. And as the Independence and its remaining fleet prepared to jump into hyperspace, Rachel felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. Humanity had lost, but they were still standing. And as long as they stood, they would fight for Earth. The galaxy had made a mistake underestimating them, and Rachel Bennett would make sure that mistake was never forgotten. The stars seemed to stretch forever, a cold, indifferent expanse of empty space. The Independence drifted silently through the void, carrying Rachel Bennett and her weary crew toward Earth's space. The battle with the Krathi had cost them more than they were willing to admit, but there was no time to rest. The galaxy had been thrown into chaos, and humanity had taken the first step toward reclaiming its place in it. "Commander, we've completed repairs on the ship," Mia Thompson's voice came over the comms. "We're at full operational capacity, but our fuel reserves are low. We'll need to get back to Earth soon." Rachel stood at the helm, staring out into the darkness, her mind focused on what was to come. They had struck a blow against the Krathi, but Rachel knew that wouldn't be enough. The Krathi were a powerful empire, and they wouldn't forget the humiliation of losing a supply depot. They'd come after Earth, and they wouldn't stop until they had wiped humanity out. "We don't have the luxury of time," Rachel said, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. "We need to get back to Earth, but we also need to make sure the Krathi can't follow us. We have to make a stand." Nathan Klein, her right-hand officer, stepped forward from his station. "The Krathi are not going to stop, Rachel. We both know that. But we don't have enough resources to launch a sustained fight. Even with the supplies we just hit, we're barely holding on." Rachel's eyes hardened. "Then we take the fight to them before they can hit us again. We need to hit their heart, cut off their access to the galaxy. We need to find their central fleet and destroy it." Nathan looked at her, his expression torn. "You're asking us to take on their entire fleet. We don't have the numbers or firepower to match them." Rachel turned to face him, her voice unwavering. "We don't need to match them, Nathan. We just need to remind them who we are. Earth is not a species to be erased from the stars." A heavy silence fell over the bridge as the crew took in Rachel's words. They had seen the destruction the Krathi could cause, and they had felt the weight of the fight. They had already lost too many, but Rachel's determination was something else. It was the fire that had driven humanity to survive time and time again. It was a fire they could follow. "Where do we even start?" Nathan asked, his voice resigned but with a hint of respect. Rachel's eyes flickered as she pulled up the map of Krathi-controlled space. A plan was forming in her mind, dangerous, reckless, but perhaps their only hope. We hit their central fleet. I've already identified a weak spot, Rachel said, pointing at a system deep in Crathai space. It's a major hub, one of their main military command stations. If we take it out, we'll cripple their ability to respond, buy Earth some time. You're talking about a suicide mission, Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. We can't take on the Crathai core like that. We'll be wiped out before we even get close. Rachel's eyes softened for a moment, but only for a moment. We don't have a choice. The Crathai won't stop until they finish what they started. If we don't act, Earth is next. The weight of those words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Nathan didn't argue. He knew the truth just as she did. Earth had been cast aside by the Galactic Council, and now it was up to them, up to this small crew aboard the Independence, to protect what was left of humanity. As the fleet approached the Crathai-controlled system, Rachel felt the tension in her chest rise. She looked around at her crew, each of them young, eager to prove themselves, but all of them carrying the weight of their mission. They had no backup, no reinforcements. This was it. If they failed, it would be the end of humanity's fight in the galaxy. We'll have to move quickly, Mia said, her voice focused as she monitored the systems. The Crathai will be expecting us. We'll have to get through their outer defenses first. I can help us slip through their radar, but it won't be easy. Rachel nodded. We'll get in close, strike hard, and then get out. No heroics, no second chances. The crew set to work with practiced precision, every movement sharp, every command quick. Rachel sat at the helm, her fingers steady on the controls, her eyes never leaving the view screen. Ready, Nathan said. We're approaching their defenses. Rachel took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The Crathai were about to learn that humanity had teeth, that they were not going to be pushed aside. On my mark, Rachel said, her voice calm despite the storm of emotions inside her. 3, 2, 1, now. The Independence shot forward, weaving through the Crathai outer defenses. Blasts from Crathai ships lit up the darkness, but the Independence moved with agility, its smaller size giving it an advantage. They had the element of surprise, but it wouldn't last long. Target the command station, Rachel ordered. All ships focus fire. The human fleet opened fire, their shots landing with precision, striking the Crathai hub. Explosions erupted in space, and the Crathai fleet staggered as their main command center took the brunt of the blow. The Crathai retaliated with a fury, but it was too late. The damage was done. We've breached their defenses, Mia reported. The Crathai flagship is going down. Rachel's chest tightened with a sense of triumph. They had done it. They had struck the Crathai at their core. Now we get out, Rachel ordered. Full speed. We can't stick around for their reinforcements. The human fleet moved quickly, the Independence leading the charge as they slipped out of the Crathai system. Behind them, the Crathai fleet struggled to regain control, their flagship falling into disarray. Rachel looked around at her crew, each one exhausted but alive, their faces filled with something new, hope. We've sent a message, Nathan said, a grin forming on his face. We're not done yet. Rachel's voice was calm, but there was fire in her eyes. We're not done yet, and we won't stop until the galaxy knows who we are. For the first time in a long while, Rachel allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had just proven that they weren't just survivors, they were fighters. And no one would forget them again. The Independence and its small fleet moved swiftly through space, their engines humming with the quiet buzz of success. Rachel Bennett sat at the helm, her hands relaxed on the controls but her mind far from calm. They had struck at the heart of the Crathai Empire, and now, with their enemy staggered, humanity had proven it wasn't going to disappear quietly. But the battle was far from over. The Crathai were not a species to take defeat lightly. Rachel knew they would be back, faster, stronger, and with a thirst for vengeance. We've made it this far, Nathan Klein said, his voice laced with relief but still cautious. But we're not done yet. They'll come after us again. Rachel nodded, her eyes focused on the distant stars ahead. The galaxy was watching and humanity had made a statement. But now they needed to prepare for the Krathai's retaliation. The message had been sent, but the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. "Get me Earth," Rachel said. Her voice was calm, but the urgency in her tone was clear. The time for small strikes was over. It was time to take Earth's defense into their own hands. The comms hummed, and a crackling image of General Haynes appeared on the screen. The lines on his face were deeper, the weight of the war evident in his tired eyes. "Commander Bennett," Haynes said, his voice steady but heavy with responsibility. "We've been tracking your progress. I won't lie, what you did, taking out their Central Fleet hub, it's been a game changer. But the Krathai will come back and they'll be angry. They'll come for Earth." Rachel stood tall as she spoke, the gravity of their situation pressing on her shoulders. "I know, but we can't just sit back and wait for them to come to us. We need to hit them again before they regroup." Haynes didn't hesitate. "You're right. I'll prepare the fleet for a full-scale defense. But you need to understand, Commander, our forces are spread thin. We don't have enough ships to fight a full-on war with the Krathai. Earth can't do this alone." Rachel's heart tightened, but she didn't show it. "We won't be alone. We've proven we can take the fight to them. We've shown the galaxy that humanity is capable of standing up to the most powerful empire in existence. And now, we need to show them that we won't back down." The general nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You've earned your place, Commander, humanity's place. I'll have the fleet ready within the hour. We'll send reinforcements, but we need to act fast." "Thank you, General," Rachel said, her voice firm. "We'll keep fighting." The screen flickered off and Rachel turned back to her crew. The weight of what she had just agreed to hung in the air, but there was no turning back now. They had sent a message to the Krathai. They had shown them humanity's strength. Now they had to defend it. Hours passed and the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the next phase of their plan. The repairs were done, their fuel reserves replenished, and their fleet now more unified than ever. The Krathai had hurt them, yes. They had taken lives and they had struck at Earth's very foundation. But they hadn't crushed them, and that's what mattered. Rachel walked through the Independence's corridors, her mind sharp and focused. The loss of the Phoenix, the devastation they'd suffered, none of it had stopped them. Humanity was not just a survivor, they were a force. "Mia, are the weapons systems fully operational?" Rachel asked as she entered the tech bay. Mia Thompson was hunched over the control panel, her fingers flying across the interface. "Ready to go, Commander. We've maxed out what we can, and the fleet's weapons are all synced up. We can hit the Krathai hard." Rachel nodded. "Good. We're going to need every advantage we can get. The Krathai will come for Earth, and when they do, we'll be ready." As the fleet jumped into hyperspace toward the Krathai's final stronghold, Rachel gathered her crew in the briefing room. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a new energy in the air. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their future. "We've come a long way," Rachel began, her voice calm yet filled with purpose. "But the Krathai are still out there. They'll keep coming until we show them that humanity is a force they can't control. We'll hit them hard, hit them fast, and remind them why they should fear Earth." Nathan stepped forward, his voice strong. "They thought they could wipe us out. They thought Earth was just another easy target. Well, they're about to find out that we're not as easy as they thought." Mia nodded. "We're ready, let's end this." Rachel smiled, though there was a deep sadness in her eyes. She had lost too much. So many people, so many lives, she had seen them fall. But in their sacrifice, humanity had found its strength. They had found their voice in the stars, and they would never be silenced. "Let's make sure the galaxy knows who we are," Rachel said. "For Earth, for everyone who believed in us." The crew gave a silent nod of agreement. The final confrontation with the Krathai came quickly. It was brutal, but the Independence and her fleet fought with everything they had. The Krathai fleet, massive and well-equipped, was not prepared for the cunning and resilience of the human force. The battle was fierce, but the Independence maneuvered like a ghost, hitting Krathi supply lines, taking down ships one by one. Every blow they struck was felt across Krathi space, sending ripples through the Empire. In the end, the Krathi flagship fell. The remaining ships, broken and scattered, tried to regroup but were too late. The message was clear. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. They would fight, no matter the cost. Rachel stood at the helm of the Independence, watching as the last of the Krathi ships retreated into the distance. Her crew was battered but alive, and Earth, for the first time in a long while, had hope. "We did it," Nathan said quietly. Rachel's gaze softened as she looked at the stars. "Yes, we did." Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never forget their name.